It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and Joe Dolan.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eating Podcast. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings. More on DraftKings a little bit later. Huge fan of their best ball using the code ROSS or the DK Sportsbook app. Programming note, by the way, we will be having a second best ball draft because a lot of you submitted entries after. Joe, we had like 2 weeks where only 4 people had entered, and I think maybe 20 people entered now. So I'll have to maybe even more. I'll have to figure out. I have not had a chance. I had the CBS NFL seminar the last 2 days. I flew up here to New England. Now I'm in preparation mode with the Eagles for their preseason game tomorrow night against the Patriots, which, by the way, Joe, interesting. I don't know if you care or not. There's only one Thursday or Friday night preseason game this week. It's the Eagles-Patriots. 13 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. I'm not exactly sure. I forgot to ask the folks at the NFL the logic about that, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so I do know that we'll over at fantasypoints.com, we'll have our DFS preseason DFS expert Darren Manser breaking things down for everybody and in our subscriber Discord. Don't worry, Ross. Preseason DFS exists. I don't consider myself a connoisseur of that. But the people who play it love it. They think there's a huge edge to it. Now, for me, my job during preseason is to try to, sort through the muck and the mire to see what's real and what isn't. And I guess I don't have enough time to do research for preseason DFS slates. Well, that's what our guy Darren Manser's for. So, yeah, he's going to have a very, very busy Saturday watching all those games.
Love it. Make sure you're checking out all their stuff over at fantasypoints.com. Use that code 24FEAST. That was the voice, of course, of my guy Joe Dolan at FG_Dolan. We've got Tiers of Dolan, which I already saw people on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL saying, where's the rest of the positions? Where's the rest of the positions? Well, we'll have running backs today. We'll do wide receivers next week. Mm-hmm. And then the last week, we can do tight ends and sort of a preseason summary, right? We'll have all the preseason games in the books. I think we'll even have the rosters at that point, maybe some roster turnover. That'll be August 28th. So that'll be an awesome, awesome episode. But let's dive into it. I think you guys know this. I'm Ross Tucker, at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. And yes, if you send an email about wanting to get into the next best ball, I got it. I did not have time to pick the other 7 entries. I don't know how I'm going to pick the other 7 entries, to be honest with you. I will figure it out. But we need to get into the running backs, Joe. People need their fantasy drafting content. Let's start with tier 1 for you. You're calling it the elites. Yeah. One of my favorite things about this, by the way, not only that I think Joe's amazing, but is Joe's category names. The elites, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. I guess the one that I think it's interesting, Joe, that you have Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson as elites. I mean, we know about McCaffrey, but to put these two guys in the same category as McCaffrey?
McCaffrey has the track record. Breece Hall finished last year as if he was going to be a McCaffrey-ish clone. And Bijan Robinson has that potential and has the offseason hype. Hey, we're going to get this guy the football. We're going to throw him the football. We don't really have a slot receiver. We're going to use him there. And we also have the non-Arthur Smith bump that's going on for Bijan Robinson. These 3 guys will be drafted in the first round of every fantasy draft you're in, sans maybe a deep 2-quarterback or super flex league. Every 1-quarterback league that you're in, these 3 guys will go in the first round. That is a guarantee. I know John Hansen over at fantasypoints.com has Breece Hall as his number 1 running back this year. I'm not there, but I think it's a little bit closer than it has been in years past. This is a little bit of a projection, with Bijan Robinson, but the youth, the projected role, and the expected, quite frankly, the known talent is enough to push Bijan Robinson into this tier for me. These guys will go in the first round of your fantasy draft. That is a guarantee, unless you're in a 2-quarterback format.
Wow, that is very, very interesting. Why the level of confidence that both Breece Hall and Bijan will get that volume, Joe?
Well, first and foremost, Breece Hall got that volume last year. And while I know Braylon Allen is better than Michael Carter or Izzy Abanikanda, look at what Breece Hall was doing at the end of last season. He had 37 carries in Week 18. He had 13 carries and 9 receptions in Week 17 in your fantasy championship. He had 20 carries and 12 receptions in Week 16 when you're playing in your fantasy playoffs. So, I have high level of confidence that Breece Hall can be an absolute monster. Now, Bijan Robinson, I'm just basing this on the fact that I think intelligent coaching is going to realize that we have 3 top 10 picks in this offense. Let's use them. Arthur Smith didn't do that, but I think the new coaching staff will in Atlanta.
Okay, what about the next tier? You're calling it the turn. Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley. Should be noted on Gibbs that right before we started recording this morning, Dan Campbell has said he thinks he's going to be fine, not concerned. I tend to believe Dan Campbell, although I guess we can't be 100% sure that Gibbs is full throttle week 1.
I completely agree. I think the fact that Dan Campbell is being forthright, he said he'll be okay, he'll be good. It seems like it's a minor injury, but nonetheless, I call this the turn because, well, that's where these guys are getting drafted. Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Jahmyr Gibbs. If you want to open your draft with a receiver and a running back, these guys are going to be the running backs who are going to be able to do that for you if you're picking at the 1-2 turn. I'm not a go running back guy, but there's an opportunity for you to maybe start your draft with Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. These guys are borderline first rounders who are falling into the second round at times for whatever reason. Gibbs with the injury. Saquon, people worried about the tush push. Jonathan Taylor's had some injuries. Taylor's my favorite of this group, but these are the guys available at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, if you want to go with a balanced approach at the start of your draft, and all of them have the potential to return top 3 or 4 fantasy value.
Should be noted, Joe, since I do the Eagles preseason games on television, they ran the tush push multiple times on Friday night last week against the Ravens. Pickett. One with Kenny Pickett, one with Tanner McKee. It did not look the same as it does with Hurts, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata, and Cam Jurgens, that's for sure. But it still ended up being successful. The point is, when they were in those situations, they still called it, right? Yeah. Like that's still their go-to. That's still their MO. Kellen Moore, new offensive coordinator, they've indoctrinated him into the way of the tush push, brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it.
Why break what isn't broken? Why fix what isn't broken? They're going to do it until somebody stops it with consistency.
Totally agree. What's the thing holding these 3 guys back from being elites, Joe?
Honestly, it's just combined injury potential, competition in Jahmyr Gibbs' case when it comes to David Montgomery. Health pass like it does with Saquon. Saquon obviously also has the rushing touchdowns potentially capped by Jalen Hurts. Jonathan Taylor has his rushing touchdowns potentially capped by Anthony Richardson. So these guys are not necessarily bell cows. I think they're in great shape. It's just the fact that they have a little bit more going against them than the elites do.
Okay, that makes sense, especially the touchdown thing. What about early down beasts? I like this category. And just to be clear, Joe, like the elites, you have CMC, you had 3, the turn 3. Early down beasts, are these the next 2 guys? Like if you're drafting, are these essentially your 7th and 8th guys, Derrick Henry and Isaiah Pacheco?
Not necessarily. I think you can make the argument for them to be there, but there are going to be some players who are going to prefer Devon Achane and Kyron Williams or Travis Etienne to these guys. But there's something I like about these two, especially if I were to start my draft with like CeeDee Lamb and being able to come back and grab Isaiah Pacheco or Derrick Henry at the end of the second, beginning of the third. I love that. Look, here's the deal. These guys are grinders. They're elite grinders. And they're on good teams. So the role is going to be good for these two. So I think Derrick Henry can have a monster year with the Ravens. I think that's why they signed him. Isaiah Pacheco was kind of an underrated bell cow at the end of last season. Look at what he was doing down the stretch and in the playoffs. He had 7 catches in his final regular season game, 7 catches and a touchdown reception in championship week for fantasy. In the final 2 playoff games, he had 4 catches and 6 catches. They are all checkdowns. You're not really designing anything for Isaiah Pacheco, but to know that he has that ability in his game gives him a little bit of a higher ceiling than I think people anticipate from Pacheco, and he's got a high floor because he's on a really good team.
Correct. It's interesting because it feels like they both have potential touchdown issues too. I mean, not that the Ravens run Lamar as much as the Eagles and the Colts, but still Lamar could steal some. And then it seems like the Chiefs always like throw the ball to Kelsey somehow when they get down near the goal line, or throw the ball somehow to somebody.
Look, they throw the ball down at the goal line, which is part of the thing that caps Isaiah Pacheco's upside, but I think a 10 touchdown season is well within the range of outcomes for him.
I think Smirnoff is the perfect vodka for crafting delicious cocktails that are easy to make and versatile for any and all fans over 21. Smirnoff is not only, Joe, the world's #1 vodka, it's an official vodka partner of the NFL. Grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer. Head over to Smirnoff.com to find recipes of delicious cocktails perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. You know me, Joe, big Labatt Blue guy. I'll be drinking a bunch of them when I head up to Buffalo for the opener with friends and living life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Okay, your next category, Joe. Potential league winners with questions.
Yeah.
Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, Travis Etienne.
So there's different issues for some of these guys. First and foremost for Devon Achane. He had injuries last year. Obviously, Raheem Mostert is still there, and they drafted Jalen Wright. But if you take a look at Devon Achane, and you want to project him positively, the next Chris Johnson is in the range of outcomes. That's 99th percentile outcome, but it is in the range of outcomes. The efficiency that he had. Our guy Ryan Heath has done a great study, and his study on running back breakout year and aging curves said basically anybody who had Devon Achane's level of efficiency that as he did last season saw a commensurate increase in reps and snaps and touches in the future. So will Devon Achane get those extra reps to counteract what is almost certainly going to be a loss of efficiency? But if he does do that and the efficiency doesn't drop as much as his role increases, Chris Johnson is a possibility here. So that's why I like Devon Achane this year. Kyron Williams, he's had injuries each of his first 2 years. They drafted Blake Corum in the 3rd round. Now, they're saying Blake Corum, they kind of view him as interchangeable with Kyron, and he's going to help keep Kyron fresh. Does that mean Sean McVay's going to use a rotation? Or does that mean Blake Corum is just an insurance policy? Remember last year, we overreacted to Zach Charbonnet and Tank Bigsby being drafted, while Kenneth Walker and Travis Etienne continued to lead those backfields. And with Etienne, he had a significant loss of efficiency last year, going from over 5 yards per carry to under 4 yards per carry. Are they going to try to work in Bigsby a little bit more this year? I think you can make an easy argument that Travis Etienne is a 3-down back, or you could look at it and say Doug Peterson's going to say, hey, he lost efficiency last year. Let's back off of him a little bit. So these guys are RB1s, but they do have some questions to them.
The next one is a cool category as well. young guns with competition. Rashad White, James Cook, and Kenneth Walker.
Well, Rashad White doesn't fit into this perfectly because I'm not really sure. I'm not a huge Bucky Irving guy. The question I have for Rashad White is he wasn't efficient last year. The reason Rashad White was so good for fantasy was his role was just massive. Are they going to try to back off of him a little bit? And drafting Bucky Irving might give them a chance to do so. James Cook, they drafted Ray Davis. James Cook, I don't know if they view him as a 15 to 18 carry a game guy. I view him as their best chance to make explosive plays in the early part of the season, at least until Keon Coleman gets his legs under him. But will James Cook cede work to Ray Davis? And Kenneth Walker has Zach Charbonnet. And Kenneth Walker also is one of those guys who he can have 9 carries for 7 yards, and if he doesn't bust off his patented 50-yard run, then he's a disappointment to you. So they still have Charbonnet, who they can work in there as well. That's what makes these guys more of a high-end RB2 than an RB1.
Got it. And then you have some other ones that I think are interesting as well. The next category, vet bell cows. Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, Ramondre Stevenson, James Conner, DeAndre Swift.
So I have vet bell cows, and I kind of ask a question. Are they bell cows? Joe Mixon hasn't really practiced as a Texan. Dameon Pierce is getting camp hype. Josh Jacobs, in theory, is a bell cow because Marshawn Lloyd is injured, but the Packers always use a running back rotation. Do the Vikings think Aaron Jones can hold up, or are they going to mix in Ty Chandler? Alvin Kamara. Well, first and foremost, he's still kind of holding out, and Kendre Miller is there, but they've been talking about how disappointed they are in Kendre Miller not being able to practice. He was hurt all last year. Ramondre is probably the best bet to be a full-season bell cow of this group, but they did sign Antonio Gibson. James Conner will be a bell cow, I'm pretty confident to say, but he's never played a full season in the NFL. Meanwhile, DeAndre Swift, I thought he had just an okay season with the Eagles last year. They still have Khalil Herbert and Rashawn Johnson. Is Khalil Herbert going to get traded? All of the money indicates that DeAndre Swift's going to be their lead back, but there are some questions here.
You only have one guy in this category. It's called the rookie, and the is in quotes. We're talking about, of course, Jonathan Brooks from the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, and the reason he's the only guy who I think has a clear pathway to being a true league winner of the rookie running backs. The problem is he's hurt. If he wasn't hurt, he'd be getting drafted in the 3rd round, but he is hurt right now. And so if you draft Jonathan Brooks, and I did yesterday on a SiriusXM draft, you have to probably prepare to plug somebody else in there for the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season. But by week 8, week 9, could Jonathan Brooks be somebody you view as an every week starter? I think there is a strong chance of that happening.
Are they going to trade Miles Sanders? What's going on there, Joe?
There's a couple of guys like that. Dameon Pierce, Khalil Herbert, Miles Sanders. I think Sanders is their 3 right now. Maybe they'll give Sanders an opportunity at the beginning of the season to prove himself, especially if Jonathan Brooks isn't ready for week 1. But I think if Jonathan Brooks isn't the lead guy, I think Chuba Hubbard will be.
Wow. Okay, well, that gets us to the next category, split backfield bros. David Montgomery, Zach Moss, Najee Harris, Raheem Mostert, Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson, Zeke Elliott.
These are all guys who are going in single-digit rounds, maybe sneaking into the 10th for a guy like Zeke Elliott, who have significant competition in their backfield. Or not just competition, but somebody who will have a role. And we'll get to those guys, but obviously David Montgomery has Jahmyr Gibbs. Zach Moss has Chase Brown. Najee Harris has Jaylen Warren. Raheem Mostert has Achane and Jalen Wright. Tony Pollard has Tyjae Spears. Brian Robinson has Austin Eckler. And Zeke Elliott has Rico Dowdle and whoever else. The Cowboys are still, in my opinion, primed to be one of those teams who trades for a running back. So that's why these guys are getting drafted where they are, because we don't expect them to be bell cows. Could something happen where one of them turns out to be a league winner? Absolutely. But right now, all of these guys are projected to be in a backfield where there's a significant split in the workload.
Got it. And then the next category is an interesting one. It's funny because I like all these players. young receiving backs with upside. I think everybody always likes guys like this. But Jaylen Warren from the Steelers, interesting to hear you call him a receiving back. Tajay Spears and Chase Brown.
I think people view Jaylen Warren as kind of a scat back, as maybe more the explosive receiver than Najee Harris, even though Najee Harris is a good receiver. I think you view Jaylen Warren as somebody who can do more on the perimeter if he's asked to. By the way, I like both Steeler backs at ADP. It's just pick your poison, which one of them do you want? Tajay Spears, I think you can make an argument. I mean, he was like the most efficient receiving back in the NFL last year. And Tony Pollard lost his efficiency significantly when he took the bell cow role in Dallas. So I think Tajay Spears, who scored in the preseason, had a nice jump cut. I think Tajay Spears is going to be projected to have a significant role with the Titans and maybe be their lead back. And Chase Brown, he was one of the most explosive players down the stretch last year. The problem for Chase Brown was he wasn't a great runner of the football. And when you have a running back, you kind of want him to be a great runner of the football. But he made big plays. Bengal beat writers have been reporting all off season that he's been the guy who's taking the majority of the first team reps in training camp over Zach Moss. I still think that Zach Moss will be the lead runner in that backfield, at least at the beginning of the season. But all three of these guys, I really enjoy drafting at their ADPs because of the upside that they give you.
That's a good time for me to let everybody know my DraftKings stud and value picks presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings, all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. My stud, Joe, it is Saquon Barkley. I just, the amount of times I think he's going to be able to get the ball in space, and I know I do stuff for the Eagles and I'm biased and blah, 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 but there's so many plays when he was with the Giants that when he got some space, he is just dynamic, explosive, powerful, all those things. It just didn't happen that often. I think he'll get the ball with room to work a lot more for the Eagles than he ever did for the Giants. And I think that as a result, I think he'll have a really good year. And then my value pick is Chase Brown. I think Chase Brown is a lot more explosive than Zach Moss. I think that the Bengals don't have Tyler Boyd anymore. The Bengals don't have a tight end that they necessarily love. I think Chase Brown's going to get a lot of those receptions. So those are my picks for this week, Saquon Barkley and Chase Brown.
I like it, Ross. Saquon, I think he's a pretty polarizing player in fantasy. There's people who are all in, there's people who are all out, but I think you could easily see where the upside lies with him.
Your next category, Joe, is boring grinders. Javonte Williams, Zamir White, Gus Edwards, Rico Dowdell.
Yeah, these are guys. You wonder how much they're going to do in the receiving game. Javonte Williams, I feel awful about because it feels like that injury that he suffered 2 years ago derailed what was looking out to be a very promising career. The other thing for some of these guys is Javonte and Zamir White are projected to be on bad teams, which could limit their upside if they're not getting a lot of work in the passing game. Gus Edwards, I think they're going to run the hell out of the ball with the Chargers, but J.K. Dobbins is there, Jarrett Patterson, Kamani Vidal. Could they trade for somebody? The Chargers, there's still a little bit of uncertainty, and I still don't know what to do with Rico Dowdle. I think he's kind of an early down guy. I still think Zeke is good on third downs, and that's where they'd use him. But it feels like Dallas could trade for running back at any point, so I have these guys kind of all grouped together.
Then you've got the other rookies, Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd, Ray Davis, who you've referenced, and Blake Corum, who you've referenced.
And there's other guys here, but these guys are players who are going in Trey Benson's going a little bit earlier. Trey Benson's actually getting drafted kind of close to James Conner. And I think if you were to put a microscope on this, I don't even think you need a microscope, but Trey Benson clearly has the best potential pathway to super relevance because James Conner's always hurt. And the Cardinals have used a bell cow. They used James Conner as a bell cow last year until James Conner got hurt. And they typically do use bell cows. Marshawn Lloyd's already hurt, which is unfortunate. I've drafted him a ton. Ray Davis, I think, has an opportunity to be the number 2 in Buffalo. Ty Johnson's been kind of hurt. And Blake Corum is the number 2 with the Rams. And if Kyron Williams were to get hurt, Blake Corum would be a potential bell cow as well.
Absolutely love it, Joe. I'm so excited for receivers next week. Make sure you check him out on social media at FG_Dolan. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We're at Ross Tucker Pod. I will take the time. Listen, I didn't pick him yet. So you still have till next Wednesday for me to go ahead and get in this best ball draft. So take advantage of any of the sponsors that you hear or rate and review the show. Ross at RossTucker.com. I'm stuffed. We're done.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.